Welcome to This Day Live, the Sunday talk show, where we discuss all things political, bringing you the top stories locally, nationally, and from around the world. I'm Reuben Abati, and This Day Live begins now. I'd like to welcome our guests today. We have from our New York office, Duarte Geraldino. Duarte, welcome to Lagos. We also have Professor Bola Akinterinwa, Director General, Mandela Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies. And of course, our resident economist, Ayo Teriba, CEO, Economic Associates. Today, we'll be discussing several topical issues. Stay tuned. Today marks 28 years since the release of South Africa's iconic leader, Nelson Mandela, from prison, and the 100th year of his birth. To celebrate their great leader, the African National Congress, ANC, launched a year-long centenary celebration. Let's take a look at the party leader, Cyril Ramaphosa's speech at the launch earlier today.
It was here that Madiba said, "Our freedom is at hand," and it was here on the 11th of February that Madiba said, "We are now marching to our appointment with freedom. We are marching to our appointment, our destiny with freedom." And it was here that our freedom struggle got into top gear when Madiba spoke at this very place. So I want to remind you all that you are at a very historic place. History was made here where you are all standing. I am sure that everybody in South Africa remembers very well where they were on this day, at this very hour, 28 years ago, when the whole world was watching. The whole world had stopped to watch Madiba's release and his first speech. That day will forever remain etched in our collective memory as a moment of great joy and great hope. For all of us as South Africans, it was a new beginning. It represented the dawn of a new era in our country's turbulent history. It encouraged our people to believe even more firmly that the shackles of oppression and exploitation would fall away. It encouraged our people to believe that after many years of struggle, as well as sacrifice and suffering, a brighter day would soon rise upon our nation. That day strengthened our people's resolve to forge a new democratic society founded on unity and justice and equality. On that day, our people witnessed not only the return of a great revolutionary and a great freedom fighter, but the beginning of the end of a system that the world had described as a crime against humanity. On that day, our people saw the future of South Africa. They saw the future of this country represented in Nelson Mandela. He became the embodiment of their shared hopes, their dreams, their aspirations, and their sense of a common nationhood. In him, Nelson Mandela, our people saw a repository of all the best values and attitudes necessary, or attributes necessary, for a new, united, and democratic society in South Africa.
Quite an impressive statement, quite moving, strong words, and as he said, quite historic.
Yeah, I've been watching
at 100, 28 years after his release. Duarte, what do you think?
I've been watching this story very, very closely, and today was pivotal because not only is he commemorating the 100th anniversary of Nelson Mandela's birth, but this particular day was chosen because it was the day that he was set free, and he was born as an international free leader of the new South Africa. But it's a really tight rope that the Deputy President Ramaphosa is walking, because he is at once honoring Mandela, but also, if we look at those images, he is trying to channel that energy to re-empower the ANC, because it right now is on the verge of a possible split. We've all been following the case with President Jacob Zuma, and we know that they are trying to push him out. But he does have some supporters within the ANC, even though he was officially kicked off of the leadership of the ANC. So right now, when you look at those images and you see Cyril Ramaphosa in front of that huge picture of Nelson Mandela, he is trying to channel as much power and as much
Some kind
energy.
of self-validation?
Yes, clearly self-validation, because he wants people to say, okay, despite the fact that we don't have enough jobs, despite the fact that in Cape Town we may be thirsty because there's a water crisis, despite all of these challenges, we still have hope that the ANC is our party. Some people say that the ANC of today is not the ANC of Mandela. And this is what he's trying to counter right now on this particular day. Make no mistakes about it. This was carefully orchestrated to give him the best possible leverage to push the current president out and strengthen the African National Congress.
So it's all political. That's what I say. Well, Prof.
Well, you see, I cannot subscribe to any argument that seeks to suggest that there was an ANC of Nelson Mandela that does not exist today or existed before. Research has clearly shown that when Nelson Mandela was under incarceration, there were two types of ANC. There was one they call the local ANC, and there is the international ANC. Now, I'm raising this issue because remembrance of 28 years or celebration of 100 years, for me, we must seek understanding of it within the framework of South Africa's relationship with Nigeria. When, for instance, Nelson Mandela was under incarceration, we were told that Nigeria was actually relating with the ANC International, all right? The ANC local did not know Nigeria. And that's why, for instance, in seeking to understand the relationship, the hostile relationship, the xenophobic attitudinal disposition of South Africa vis-a-vis Nigeria, is largely a resultant from that. Now, the local ANC did not know that Nigeria was a frontline state, did not know what Nigeria contributed. Nigeria was...
No, but Prof, no.
I'm
Maybe
coming.
we're dealing with two different issues.
No, I'm coming.
Because the international ANC was not necessarily working across purposes with the local ANC.
Yeah, but the
And the issue here is not really about ANC or South Africa and other African countries?
No, you see, it's related. The critical point is that Nigeria was dealing with Nelson Mandela's international group. All right. But now, the international members, all right, the people with whom Nigeria was dealing with, they've been dying one after the other. So, the national ANC does not, quote and unquote, know much about what Nigeria has done.
Well,
so what we are
no,
doing,
let me rephrase my intervention.
Okay.
What we're dealing with is the symbolism of Nelson Mandela.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Look,
that symbolism, what is the significance? And going beyond that, you know, celebrating 100 years of the centenary of Mandela, who is not just a South African figure, he's a global figure. What does it mean? What does that centenary celebration mean to South Africa, to Africa, and the rest of humanity in terms of the values that it represents? That should be the purpose.
You see, that's why I started my story explanation from the Genesis, when you want to appreciate 100 years, etc. When he died, when Nelson Mandela passed on, at the official ceremonies, was Nigeria duly acknowledged like others? Please, let's go back to history.
So you feel
we are talking about two different things.
Prof, I'll come back to you.
You are trying to relate it
of South Africa after Mandela.
Wait, you are trying to relate it to Nigeria. You are looking at it from the point of view of relationship of South Africa with Nigeria. But the issue that they are highlighting is the struggle, the South African liberation struggle.
Under Mandela?
No, not under Mandela. Mandela was incarcerated because of the struggle.
Yes.
And so they are celebrating his release, which also coincides with his centenary. Mandela symbolized the struggle. Mind you, Mandela, now he's dead, but the struggle has been sustained. In his lifetime, he had the opportunity to be president. He handed over after one term, and he never came out to scold any president publicly, and they've succeeded. This is the third person to be president after him. And they managed...
Ramaphosa is not president, yeah.
To be the leader of the ANC, and is likely to succeed Jacob Zuma.
Was Nigeria
and they
not part
managed,
of the
let's
struggle?
not talk about Nigeria first.
Was Nigeria not part of the struggle?
They managed to sideline the attempt by Jacob Zuma to personalize the struggle and, impose his wife on his wife stands defeated. She's not the party leader.
If I may assist Prof, I think the point that Prof is making is that Ramaphosa, when he was speaking, talked about, Mandela representing justice, unity, humanistic values, and being, a shining light for a new day in South Africa, not just in South Africa, but in the whole of Africa. But after Mandela, we have seen a situation whereby the succeeding generation will seem not to appreciate the contributions of other Africans. So he legitimately, considering the experience we have had in Nigeria, can complain about xenophobia in South Africa, but Nigerians are not the only targets. Other persons from Central Africa have also been targets.
He's suggesting that it was ANC.
Just a moment. He is talking about the legacy of Mandela. Mandela as a global leader. And maybe in the new South Africa, Africans also have expectations that have not been met. Okay, Prof?
I don't have any problem at the level of Nelson Mandela as an individual, as an internationalist. He was incarcerated, yet he came back with a forgiving mind, etc. We all know this. But we need to put Nelson Mandela within the framework of intra-African politics itself. You cannot be celebrating struggle within the framework of Nelson Mandela without also talking about Nigeria. That's just my Nigeria is part of the struggle.
Mandela recognized
let me rephrase the discussion. Duarte,
of Nigeria.
You are from the United States, and in the United States, you have heroes, you have symbols, right?
Yes.
Now, how strong is this in terms of moving the community forward?
Incredibly strong. In fact, right after Mandela is released, you see a stream of Americans flooding South Africa. Admittedly, all of Africa, but Cape Town, Joburg were major centers in large part because they wanted to experience life under Nelson Mandela, because he was at once a man but also a symbol. And to be frank, he was a bigger symbol than he was sort of a man at that point. And they are trying to empower that symbol. That symbol is still alive. And right now with the politics, and I get what you're saying, that Nigeria factors in this, but that's all local right now in South Africa. And they are concerned that they are heading towards an era of instability within that country, that we had all thought when apartheid ended and they avoided all this bloodshed, that it marked the beginning of a much more stable future. But now we're seeing that's not quite the case. And with this polarizing growth of inequality, and as an economist, you see this very well. Cyril Ramaphosa, incidentally, was not a rich man when he was in the struggle with Mandela, was not a rich man when he was walking with Mandela, but today, he's one of the richest people in South Africa.
That's right, yeah. With investments in Nigeria. With investments in Nigeria. Massive, yeah.
And many ordinary South Africans are still impoverished.
Yes.
And they have no access
Yeah,
to
just to
basic
qualify,
opportunities.
a point just made by you, that South Africa is approaching, an era of instability.
Or I'll
Rather-
use the
rather-
word uncertainty.
Wait. They are trying to exit an era of instability.
Oh, so you said they were already there.
To which Jacob Zuma allowed the country to slide. And that's part of the reason why he's been voted out as the leader of the party. When we covered the election of the ANC, it was said that if Jacob Zuma continued, you risk division. And that if this guy...
Celebrating
took part,
Mandela, remembering him,
gave
I think it's a
stability
timely
to us.
reminder of certain important values, not only for South Africans, but for all Africans and for all countries in the world where issues of oppression, domination, and inequality are.
And the good thing,
Reuben, has appetite come to an end in South Africa?
Well, that would be another
and the good
discussion.
thing is that the struggle is alive.
Well, let's come back home. Back home, Nigeria's Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, said on Thursday that the adoption of a state police is the way to go in meeting the security needs of Nigeria. I quote him, "We cannot realistically police a country the size of Nigeria centrally from Abuja," he said. State police and other community policing methods are clearly the way to go, Osinbajo told participants at the two-day National Security Summit organized by the Senate. Highlighting the country's complex security challenges, the Vice President further noted. He said securing Nigeria's over 900,000 square kilometers and its 180 million people require far more men and material than we have at the moment. Meeting the 1 policeman to 400 person ratio prescribed by the United Nations will require triple our current police force, far more funding of the police force, and far more funding of our military and other security agencies. Now, gentlemen, I know we have 2 Nigerians and we have Duarte, but let me start with Duarte. I mean, they have state police in the United States, I believe, if I'm correct.
We have state policing authorities, but we also have a bunch of local authorities, city police. So, for example, New York has, if you could put the New York City Police Department against many of the armies of the world, it's that large. But because of that, there's also a lot of friction with other municipalities. One of the concerns that I see with having state police is that there may emerge differences within pay, within command, within the treatment of people within different states, because some states are dominated by particular tribes, unlike the state that we're in now. And so that's a little bit unnerving right now. We see in New York, in America, there's a lot of drama right now with the police because they're concerned that we live in an era of over-policing. And I get in Nigeria that there is crime, and you are trying to solve that. But it's a tightrope that you have to walk. Like, who is going to make sure that they're being paid enough and that they have allegiance to the government and not their local fiefdom? So that's my concern. Just
But does it work in terms of ensuring security?
That's a difficult one because, the United States, we have that title, United States, but we are really operating like a bunch of different countries where, for example, in a political stance, the middle of the USA largely elected President Trump, but along the states, it might as well be a totally different place. In fact, Major cities along the East Coast and the West Coast have petitioned the UN to have a seat at the table where our federal government has chosen not to. When you have state police, you're strengthening state governments, and therefore those state governments are going to have force now, much more than they had before, because the teeth have been controlled by your federal government.
No, but you see, you raise a very beautiful point. But at the level of international law and relations, a constitutive state, a component state of the United States cannot, be allowed to have a representation at the level of the United Nations. It is like Nigeria, like the United States, all right, that can allow any of its constituent parts, all right, to go. When Nigeria was under a regional system, the various regions had such representations, but at least within a federal government framework. I think that having a state police, community police, is quite good. And we must commend the Vice President for seeing clearly like Johnny Nash, who says he can see clearly now that the rain is gone. Now the rain is coming now, it's not yet gone. Please, the beauty of having a state police should be understood and explained at two different levels. The first level is that there is contradiction in a governor being on paper declared as a chief security officer, yet he has to take directives from a federal police authority. All right? It is the IGP who will give directives. Everybody will have to seek his opinion, his position. Yet the governors are said to be the chief security officer. It's not possible. You cannot be taking instructions centrally while you are the chief security officer. The second point is that when you have a community police, a state police, the issue is that you are more conversant. Your territorial, operational territorial, landscape is limited. Community policing, you know who lives where. In America, for instance, you foment trouble today, whether in New York or you go to California State, the next 3 minutes, they know what's happening. In spite of the fact that you have local policemen and district policemen, federal policemen. So I think that Nigeria's future in terms of security is getting better. All right? We can hope for better days to come than having...
Well, not many people will agree with you on that. Terrible. Look, in this country, we once had native police authority, something almost the equivalent of community policing.
Yes.
There's a book on it, Kemi Rotimi, I think that's his name, The Police in the Federal State in Nigeria. And he talked about how that community policing, the idea of native police authority, was abused and hijacked by politicians. And those who oppose the idea of state police, they're saying that, look, given the nature of politics in Nigeria, it will be abused.
Yes, the risks clearly are there, as you have said, and the benefits are there. And Nigeria, it's Nigeria's choice. It's a matter of choice. But we should not ignore our history. You might appeal to the First Republic history, in which you had the regions also having their own, but the long period of military rule meant that, the police became, we run a unitary police rather than a federal.
It's over-centralized.
Yeah. Next year, it'll be 20 years since we returned to democracy. So if we want to deepen the democratic transition, we have to do it carefully. We should not play up one side of the argument. We should not play up just the benefits or just play up the demerits. We should put the two side by side and go for how to reap the benefits and also mitigate the likely risks. You have a situation in Nigeria where a large population of people living within any particular state are not indigents of that state. So how do you deal with that? How do you ensure that you have a state police force that will be fair
Yes.
to the people from other states?
Where there is state police fair in the U.S.
Sometimes they're not.
If you look at this issue about Black Lives Matter and all of that, you know.
Yeah, soon you'll be saying, like Igbo lives matter. I mean, there could be some form of protest like that. I mean, one of my other concerns is funding. How do you make sure that all these state police departments are going to be funded equally? Or is it going to be based on taxes within the municipality? And what type of life does that mean for these officers? You know, if you have one state that generates a substantial amount of wealth, they can afford to pay their state police much more and therefore be more protected. And in other states that, to be frank, I mean, we know that some states generate far less wealth, contribute far less to the country's GDP.
Is that an issue?
How can they fund these state police?
And then the police begin to extort money.
Exactly.
Do they do that in the U.S.? Do policemen in the United States collect bribe?
I don't know.
Anywhere you cannot pay the police, they will extort.
I want to put him on the spot. Do they do that in the U.S.?
We have so many police departments. Like, there's so many. We have 300 million people. We have so many towns, and we have some police departments that have 4 officers.
Yeah.
4 officers. You don't know what they're doing. You have 4 officers.
But here in Nigeria, I mean, police corruption is a major issue.
If we have in place a true federal system, in which case each state assumes full responsibility, all right, for this type of concerns, please, the problem of funding wouldn't be there. The issue is simply that at the end of the day, every state in Nigeria will go to Abuja, cap in hand, to be giving money. Everybody is asking. You need to increase your revenue generating capacity, all right? In the context of the US, please, security is well defined. You have police authority for specific assignments. It's not the same thing in Nigeria, all right? So I think that when we have state police, the issue of the possibility of his being abused by politicians can be an issue. Then address that. But when it comes to real security issues, please, when you know, go to London, go to everywhere. They know who lives where, all right? But when you bring a Yoruba policeman, you take him to Imo State. The first 1 year, he needs to be acquainted with the people living there. There is no way they can prevent kidnapping and so on and so forth. But when people live there, when you deploy citizens or people, the indigenous people living there, please, intelligence gathering will be easier. All right?
Well, that's the whole idea about community policing, which was introduced, I think, during the Tafawa Balogun era. And the Nigeria police, since then, has tried a number of measures to decentralize, to reduce the unitary nature of the Nigeria police, including creating zonal headquarters headed by AIGs and all that.
And state governments providing logistic support.
Providing logistic support. Yeah. I mean, I served for 4 years on the board of the Lagos State Security Trust Fund. And part of the idea was to assist the security agencies to provide better security in Lagos State. But however, all of this is to be located in Nigeria in the larger national question. It's not just state police. It's also about fiscal federalism. It's also about system of governance. It's also about power rotation. So Nigeria has a lot of issues to deal with, not just state police. And the 2014 National Conference dealt with it. The 2005 National Conference dealt with it. But nothing came out of it. The APC has also come up with a number of proposals, including state police. But when is Nigeria going to confront the burning national questions? That, I think, is where the challenge lies. Prof, what do you think?
I think you've struck the nail on the head. When? I think it's now. Now, because the challenge has now been identified. I said earlier on that Professor Oshimbajo is now seeing more clearly. We've been discussing all these issues in the past, but they are not taking it seriously. But now that national unity is threatened and the movement towards restructuring now is moving at a higher velocity, I think the situation will compel the political stakeholders to decide now. I think it is
On
now.
that note, Prof, we'll take a short break here on This Day Live, the Sunday talk show. But do stay tuned. When we return, we'll be talking about the former INEC chairman, Professor Jega's comments on militias. Don't go away. Welcome back to This Day Live, the Sunday talk show here on the Arise News channel. Professor Ayo Teriba on Friday said Nigeria's democracy is not delivering dividends to the people due to the autocracy of politicians, which is connected to military rule. The former INEC chairman, who ushered in the current administration, said, in Nigeria, we have been talking about militias. Many of the prominent politicians now are people who learned politics under military rule, particularly under the Babangida politics of transition. Many of them now have a do-or-die mentality of engaging in the election, and it's a mindset that was imbibed under military rule. According to him, Africa's democracy, instead of providing the dividends to the people, is creating instability and crisis. True or false? This is the umpire of the 2015-2011 elections, now practically, throwing his hands up in despair, saying something is wrong. Prof, is it possible to have people with a military hangover, as he's saying, running a democracy? It's a very strong statement coming from the guy. I thought he was going to deny it,
and it is well timed. Okay. It is quite appropriately timed.
Oh, that's a good one coming from you.
Yeah. Talk about
how well timed it is.
Do or die mentality in this season of letters.
Yes.
Being written to the president, telling him, don't contest in 2019. Telling him, one was telling the president not to contest, one was telling the electorate not to vote for him. Don't let him win. Military. It's the kind of mindset.
They have about the style of the administration itself.
It's a military hangover.
An administration that has been accused of not respecting court orders.
But it doesn't matter. You let the electorate judge in a democracy. Yes. It is the electorate that will have their say. And you don't have to incite them.
But you see,
particularly when you are talking with individuals with history of coups in the past, it means that they have not.
No, I'll ask you a question. You are pro-government on apologetical.
Oh, you are.
No, I'm
anti-government.
No, I'm trying to get your view.
Secrets out there.
Let's get the labels right.
Just wait.
Yes.
Do you sense that Ayo Teriba is regretting anything? Because he was the INEC man. Who brought...
No, there are two things. He made.
Yeah, is it an expression of regret?
There are two components. It's not an expression of regret. He's saying that military mentality, do or die military mentality, should stop. And he's saying that it's important that democracy delivers dividends for the populace.
So is he saying, is that a comment on the performance?
Of the citing, it's a situation. He's saying that, look, don't resort to this do or die mentality of public incitement that can brew instability, which is going to rob the populace of the dividends of democracy.
Anyway, Prof, quickly, before I go to Duarte.
Okay, you see, I want to agree to disagree with Professor Jega's statement. Agreement only to the extent that the expectations, the democratic dividends are not forthcoming. To that extent, I think he's right. Now, do or die mentality is not scientifically speaking, traceable to the military. The do or die mentality has been a main feature of politics in Nigeria.
That's
for
correct.
long. All right? In this case, the electoral code, electoral conditionalities are such that people will have to sell their property, all right, get collaterals to contest. And the first objective of any elected politician in Nigeria is to recover his or her investment.
Most politicians, not any.
Well,
not any politician.
From records, everybody is interested in that. The critical point there, which we should address, is that to a great extent, military regimes have militarized civilians. And the military have been civilianized. All right. In such a way now that, look, when you see civilians on the road, they throw salute more professionally even than the soldiers.
That's not correct.
So, look, please, you see when...
Because there are different forms of salute.
Please, I know. You see, when people joking, please, I normally take public transport from Ogota to go to Ondo because I want to interact with the people. Yes.
Former Director General of the
Precisely.
Institute of International Affairs.
Please.
You take bus to go home?
I
This
do.
is boss, it's public.
Yes, even boss. The boss, I do that one. I interact. I listen to what people say. If you look at how drivers, all right, discuss, you will be surprised, all right, how they discuss the economy. They are not looking at it in terms of statistics, in terms of econometrics, but they raise fundamental issues. And I learn seriously from that. I go back and sit down. So please, you see, at the end of the day, there is the civilian blood running in the veins, in the capillaries of soldiers, the military, and
Anyway,
vice versa.
whatever we say, I think we should commend Professor Jega for his
speaking at
honesty,
this time.
Yes,
for his sincerity. But Duarte, quickly, before we move on from this
Well, the
subject,
brief
do
comment
you
is
have
that-
do or die politics in the United States?
We have do or die politics everywhere.
Okay.
Everywhere. But it strikes me as strange that he would mention this militiation, because it really sort of, in my view, is an effort to disqualify the people who actually do have military backgrounds, who may actually be really well qualified to take on a position of leadership. Now, I've been meeting with a lot of the younger politicians, the ones who want to run during the next election cycle. Many of them do not have military backgrounds. And they say that one of the difficulties that they face is that whenever you have someone with a long military history and you present him versus someone who does not to voters, voters will naturally go for the one with the military history in Nigeria. This is the problem they're facing. So I see efforts at highlighting the militiation as a way of poisoning that well, which is not necessarily a good thing, but I recognize that it may help some of the younger politicians who clearly don't have a military background.
Yeah, well, it will probably take a while before Nigerians get out of the military hangover.
Of their military background.
No, he's talking about military hangover in the Nigerian society.
Yeah, the cases where the electorate has favored people with military history are cases in which they've been either head of state or chief of staff to supreme headquarters. They have visibility. They are known to the electorate versus an unknown.
Yes.
Yeah, so and it had worked in their favor.
Well, but you know, even when the candidate is an unknown, usually you have a military figure in the background, operating as a godfather.
Yeah.
But as I said, we've had this military hangover since 1999, but it's a process. As our democracy matures in Nigeria, we'll probably get out of it. Let's move on to INEC. The Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, recently released the dates for the 2019 election into executive and legislative offices at the national and state levels. They also began the registration process for the permanent voters card. This process has been fraught with many controversies, with several editorials alleging that the process is much more successful in the north than it is in the south. Now, let me ask the two Nigerians here.
Yeah, I know.
Prof and Teriba, have you guys registered? Do you have PVCs? Because you can't just come on television and comment, and then on election day you don't have a voter's card. Do you have your PVC?
I'll leave that as a surprise.
Surprise for you on election day. you go get your PVC. Prof, you have a PVC?
Well, it's a difficult question you have asked.
How is it difficult? It's your responsibility.
I have a PVC issued 2-3 years back under the Jonathan administration. But the PVC they are talking about today, I don't know whether I have to renew that. There's not much information about that. So if the existing PVC that was issued to me before is still valid, yes, I can say, yes, I do have a PVC. That means it's valid for the purposes of a 2019 election. But if, for whatever reasons, what I'm currently holding is no longer valid, then I do not have.
Okay, but I mean, these are some of the concerns that INEC will have to deal with. And I guess they have to do more in terms of informing the people. There were some people who even thought that the voters registration exercise has ended, whereas it's a continuous exercise. And what I find interesting is that religious bodies, churches, workplaces, they've been mobilizing people and asking them to go and register. But people say they meet a lot of difficulties, particularly in the southern part. I mean, the report by Vanguard says, look, the thing is going well in Katsina, it's going well in Kaduna, you know, but it's not going well in southern Nigeria. Teriba, would you like to comment on this?
Oh, well, we are like a year away from the election. And so if problems have been discovered, we take measures to try and make sure that they are redressed, so that there is more balance in the process. I've, been following this issue on the social media, that in the South, people tend to be more vocal on the social media about politics, whereas in the North, majority of the population are quiet on the social media, but they have the vote. They take time to register and so on. So maybe we should, let people become more aware that their real voice is their vote, not what they say on social media.
Very good.
But you see, I think analytically, if a statement is made that the PVC and the registration processes are succeeding in one part of the country, but not succeeding in another part, the challenge, all right, the analytical challenge is to find out why. Is it that, for instance, in the part of the country where it is succeeding, it is progressing, it is facilitated, is there any, for instance, a more favorable attitudinal disposition to it, contrary to what obtains here in the other part where it is said? You see, in Nigerian politics, insinuation as a factor, deductive conclusions as a factor cannot be missed. What is being suggested now, indirectly, is that the administration of Muhammadu Buhari might be favoring registration in his constituency for the purposes of 2019.
That's correct.
That's the issue, and that's what we should
just before we go, look, Duarte, in the US, do you have to push people to perform their civic duties?
You do, and the big point is always trying to strengthen the mental link between registering to vote and your own well-being. For many people who don't have means, who don't have resources, it's a big jump thinking that your vote counts. And so I imagine there are differences between the North and the South, and if you don't think that you are significant enough, and that's the challenge, because politically, everyone's equal, but economically there are such vast differences that having the will to actually say, okay, yes, my vote will make a difference, that's one of the biggest challenges I see here in Nigeria.
Yeah, it's really the biggest challenge in Nigeria, for every citizen who is qualified to vote, to make sure that his or her vote counts. But the only way you can count is if you get
The voters card.
the voters card. You're watching This Day Live, the Sunday talk show, here on Arise News with me, Reuben Abati. We're going to take a short break now, but when we return, we'll be talking about the Egmont Group fiasco. Don't go away. Welcome back to This Day Live, the Sunday talk show here on the Arise News channel. Now, to news on the economy. Nigeria could be kicked out of the Egmont Group if it cannot resolve where the Nigeria Financial Intelligence Unit should be located. There are two different versions of a bill to grant financial and operational autonomy to the unit. Those versions still need to be harmonized before they can be signed into law. But a power struggle is complicating matters. The Senate committee recommended the unit be moved from the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission to the Central Bank of Nigeria. But the House committee is pushing back, saying it wants the unit to stay within the EFCC. If the impasse is not resolved, Nigeria will be kicked out of the group and there will be dire consequences, like new barriers to funding transactions. The Egmont Group is a 152-nation network of national financial intelligence units. The expulsion could impact the ability of Nigerian banks to issue credit and debit cards, and it does not stop there. International ratings of Nigerian financial institutions could also suffer. Now,
So it's all a question of faith in the monetary system. And right now we live in an incredibly integrated world. And so if Nigeria is not a member of this group, then it looks like the world has a little bit less faith in the economy of Nigeria. I mean, that's sort of the big picture. But on a very ground level, when you talk about not being a member of this group impacting the ability of people to get credit cards and ATMs, that's a real world problem because already the government released some figures saying ATM use was up, people are using more of these cards. But when you have an impediment like this, which is literally a political battle, not even something real, then that's troubling. That's deeply troubling for Nigeria and for really the strengthening of an already robust economy.
yeah. So you are the economist.
Right.
This raises our liability level.
Oh, well, this
great consequences.
could raise. Yeah, could, possibly. the bills had been passed since July 2017. So why did the harmonization have to take 7 months? And now that the stakes are high, I guess it should just ginger the two chambers of the National Assembly to harmonize.
Yeah, but we don't have much time. I mean, by March, the Egmont Group is likely to take a decision.
Well, how long does it take, for the two chambers to harmonize, knowing the cost, the likely consequences, negative consequences? So it's a question of us, encouraging the National Assembly to do the needful and the president to assent to it. They have to decide, should it reside in the central bank or should it reside?
Yeah, but it's not just about the National Assembly. It's also about certain forces within the system resisting this
But the
particular
decision
suggestion.
now has to be taken to avoid those negative consequences.
Because it looked like even the EFCC didn't want to hands off control.
Well,
of
I
the
don't think that
NFI.
even the group kicked against the interference from the EFCC.
Yeah, I think that's where the issue
Yeah.
is. Not really
Your
the
financial
law.
intelligence unit or agency does not have to be militarized.
Exactly. This is the
Putting it
point.
under EFCC is militarizing it.
Because that presumes something bad is happening.
And
Where if
because
it's
they also complained about disclosure of confidential information, intimidation of persons being investigated, contrary to international best practices. So even without the law,
Yes.
there are issues on the ground in terms
Yes.
of the mode of operation that the Egmont Group is concerned about. Prof, you have a word on this?
You see, internationally speaking, EFCC cannot have the aura, the personality, the integrity of a central bank of Nigeria. We have association of central banks in Africa, and particularly at the regional level. It is the CBN that is institutionally recognized, all right, to relate with its counterparts the world over. Now, bringing in EFCC, for instance, is just taking another agency of government to be acting internationally. All right.
But Prof,
So,
I think in the long run, it's not even about the location of the department. I think the Egmont Group is actually asking for the independence
Yes.
of the Financial Intelligence Unit,
Absolutely.
which actually predated the establishment of the EFCC.
You are right. I'm coming to that point. That's my second point before coming to the third one. You see, autonomy is critical in financial transactions. The moment you bring in government's interference, where is the factor of confidentiality of your national transactions? So, Egmont Group, more than 100 member states.
152.
I know, you rightly pointed that one out. More than 100 already. Even 152 out of the 194, 195 member states of the international community. That's a very high percentage. So they cannot be wrong. There's a tradition, there's a culture they are following. So the location, I think it will be at the level of the CBN for whatever that one serves as a purpose. So in this case, in terms of implications for Nigeria, not having access to Visa cards, all those facilities we enjoy, I think that the honest Nigerians will suffer.
Well, I think that consumer end of it is very important because increasing agony, despair, discomfort for the average Nigerian would, become an issue. And
I will be very shocked if it comes to that.
Well, I hope not. This is the purpose of this discussion. Well, we've got to go, gentlemen. Thank you all for coming. You've been watching This Day Live, the Sunday talk show, here on Arise News. I'm Reuben Abati. From our team here in Lagos, and particularly Duarte, who has joined us. It's bye for now, and thank you very much for watching.